Welcome to today's Awesome Marriage Podcast. I'm excited to have Nancy join me again today. We're going
Thank
to talk about what is the hardest part about building a thriving marriage. And this is one of the questions, some of the questions that people have sent in. We're going to explore that today, and knowing that it doesn't just happen by accident, doesn't it? It takes
No,
intentionality, it takes work, it takes a lot of grace for your spouse as you
that's
do
right.
those kind of things. We'll talk about the hard stuff, and we'll talk about the beauty of it. And we'll talk about building that solid foundation on Christ. And so, whether you're newly wed or decades in, I think this is for you. And I think you'll gain something out of it. And we're excited to share with you today.
I am.
Are you?
Mhm.
Okay. You doing all right?
I'm doing great.
That's good. Okay, let's start big. In your view, what's the hardest part about building a thriving, Christ centered marriage?
The hardest part,
Yeah.
I think distractions. Life happens and you're going along just fine, and then wham, something will hit you. Good
Yeah.
or bad, but I think keeping your focus is really hard. Keeping your priorities, God first, spouse second, that family third, everything else. So that's what it is for me as far as, what comes in the way.
Yeah, and I think just some of our emotional stuff that we deal with gets in the middle of it. I mean,
Yes.
frustrations and
Yeah.
anger, and how do we handle those things? And sometimes we don't handle them very well.
Right.
And when we don't, you're not building a thriving marriage. For me personally, it's always dealing with selfishness, and how do I set that aside and not be selfish, especially in my relationship with you, my relationship with God. And so I think all that, those are things that really kind of handicap us. And I think it's how we deal with those. Do we really deal with them, or we just say this is the way marriage is and it's not going to be much better, and so
Well,
we'll
that's not
just
a very
exist?
good,
No.
don't be negative.
Well, right, because it'll never get you what, when you stood at the altar, what you wanted and
That's
what you
right.
thought you were going to have the rest of the time.
That's
And wherever
exactly
you are in your
right.
marriage, God's got more for you than that,
He
right?
does.
Okay, was there a moment in our marriage where you realized it wasn't going to thrive on love alone? What changed after that?
Well, the thing is, I think we were in lust, not in love
I
when we
was.
got married.
For sure.
Anyway, well, okay. So I think that we had to build true love into our marriage,
Okay.
and with all that comes with that respect and unselfishness on our part,
Yeah.
all that. And I just think that we've learned to build bit by bit into a marriage that's really blossomed into what God intended.
Hmm.
I wish that we had come to it a little sooner, like after about a week instead of years. But it did take a while before we got to that place. And now it's so rich and wonderful that, you long for what you missed, but you move on with what you got.
Yeah, and I think it is a learning process for most couples. I don't
Yeah,
think anybody gets it right off. It is
right.
part of that process of learning. I think there was a time that I thought, well, if I loved you enough, everything was going to be okay.
Yeah,
And to realize that no, we had to have God in the center of it, no
yeah,
matter, because I was going to screw up. I know you were surprised at that I would screw up, but that I would screw up. I wasn't going to be perfect. I wasn't going to love you perfectly. I wasn't going to always treat you the way you wanted me to treat you, but God would. He
yeah.
would love you unconditionally and treat you perfect all the time. And so I had to realize that it didn't matter how much I loved you, if God wasn't in the equation,
Exactly.
it wasn't going to happen.
Right,
It wasn't going to work in the way that God designed it.
right.
Sure, but I think there comes a lot of freedom when you finally let go of that and realize I don't have to
Hmm.
keep loving you more. I can love you as best I can, but then God loves you
That's
more,
right.
and rely on Him to fill those
That's
gaps, right?
Well, and I think too, you've got to realize how much God loves you individually.
Mm-hmm.
Until you realize how much God really loves you as a person, you're not totally free to love another as your husband, your wife, your kids, until you have that relationship with Christ that you realize how much He loves you.
Yeah,
You're not freed up to really love. So
I think that's
that would be
true.
my first prayer for everyone, to know Christ and to know Him deeply and personally. Let the Holy Spirit take over your heart, your mind, your marriage.
Because He does teach us how to love each other. His
Yes,
unconditional love, that we'll
it's His
never able to do
plan.
that completely,
Yeah,
but He sets an example that we
yeah,
can follow.
it's His plan.
Yeah. So, how do we intentionally pursue emotional intimacy in the day-to-day busyness of life? And we're still busy, both of us. We both
Yep.
still work, and we still have family and a lot of
Hmm.
activities. So,
Yeah.
how do we pursue it today?
Well, we've always made time for that, and I think that's been one of the kingpins in our marriage, is to be able to take time and make time to, deliberately set aside time just for us, just between you and me,
Yeah,
every day. And, if we miss a day, move on, go to the next day and make sure you do it the
don't
next
miss
day.
two.
Yeah, don't miss two.
Right.
So I think with that, being one of the keys of our marriage, I think
Yeah.
that's made a big difference. And yet, I know there are people who are out there who have a husband or a wife who's not real communicative. And that makes it harder, but you've got to hang in there and keep working at it.
Right, because and I think it's it's some great resource lots of marriage questions to ask your spouse and things
Exactly.
like that. You help your spouse to
Yeah.
be more open
Yeah.
and be able to share more and be patient with it
Yeah.
because it's going to be a
That's a
process.
good idea.
If somebody,
Sometimes have a little help there
yeah,
to
and if
get you
somebody had
going.
done it for 25 years,
Yeah.
it's going to take a little time
Yeah.
for them to get over that. So I think that is, and I think just the consistency and connection makes a difference.
Yeah.
You may not feel like, okay, we spent 15 minutes together today and everything. What's the difference? Well, it's doing it tomorrow and the next day and the next day
That's
and
right.
the next month and all that kind of stuff where it comes
The
together.
next year,
Next year, next decade, and
next decade.
century, whatever about. So, what does intentionality look like in our marriage now, and has that evolved over time?
Don't you think we've been very intentional about realizing we made a commitment and nothing's going to come to break that up?
Yeah,
I mean, we used to throw out the divorce word a lot when we were first married. That was, like, gotcha, I'm going
yeah,
to divorce you. And then now we decided that's not a word in our vocabulary. Commitment is. And so we stick to that.
yeah. I think our intentionality has pretty much always been there. I think it's easier now. We have more
Yes.
time. We don't have young
Hmm.
kids in the home and
Yeah.
stuff like
Yeah.
that.
That's
And
true.
so I think it was a little harder in the gap. The years when kids were home and they were in activities and were running and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. I think it was harder to find that.
Hmm.
We had to be very intentional then. Now it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Because around 6 o'clock in the evening, we both are able to sit down together. I get home from work or I come out of my office. You're usually home from whatever you've been doing. And so we have that time
Yeah.
and it's not interrupted like it was when the kids were.
Right.
And that's just something you have to go with instead of just saying, we'll put our marriage on the back burner till the kids grow
No.
up. That's not going to work.
No.
Because
We tried that and it didn't work.
no, and so when the kids grow up and leave and you're going, what did
Yes.
we miss?
Yeah.
And how do we connect now?
Well, we realize now what we were missing. I just
Right.
wish we'd have realized it sooner.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
So how has trust been tested in your marriage? How did you work through it together?
Trust. I think I've always trusted you, but in other ways, such as trusting you to provide for me, to let you be the financial leader. Even though I worked, I trusted you
Right.
to take over the finances, and not that that's a sure fast way for any couple, but I think in our lives, I think I was trusting you to take your rightful role in the home as the head of the home,
Yeah.
and that was hard for me at first. So.
Yeah, talk about that. You were really thought you should be the leader
Well, I was the eldest
in
of
your
3 girls, and, that comes with a lot of responsibility.
yeah, you took care of them.
Took care of them. And, so I was always kind of the boss, but
I know
I
you
decided it
wanted
was hard,
you wanted to be
but
my
I had
boss.
to I did, and that just didn't work, so.
No, it didn't. It just, I'm glad it didn't because that
Yeah,
would
me
have
too.
not been good for either one of
No,
us or
that's
for our
true.
marriage.
Yep.
Do you think it's easy to isolate in marriage even when you're technically not alone?
Well,
You
yeah.
really have someone there. I've had someone tell me if they had gotten married and their spouse they said, I'd rather be single than know they're in the other room. They could be with me and they're not.
Wow. That's sad.
And so but that says a lot about
Yeah.
just getting married doesn't mean you're going to not
No.
feel alone all
No.
the time. And so I think it's something that we have to work on,
Well, that's true. I mean, isolation's bad in you need to realize that it's not good to be alone. God said that.
Yeah,
You can break away for, a time of fasting and prayer, or I just need a day to myself, I need a weekend, whatever. but make sure that it doesn't go on too long.
Yeah, because I think we all need some alone time. We
Yeah,
both
oh
do.
yeah, for
Times we
sure.
just are
Yeah.
able to do our own thing or to
Mhm,
just be
mhm.
alone with our thoughts or some things like that. That's very
Yeah,
different than when you feel like you're just not isolating, when you're
exactly.
isolating.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Have you ever felt you were carrying the weight of the marriage alone?
Hmm. Well, not really. I think in your, I don't know, you maybe you could,
I
I
think
don't think so.
I think when I felt that way is when you went through your struggles of
Yeah,
did you
that's
love me
true.
enough to stay married, things
Yeah.
like that, that I felt like, okay, I got to keep this thing together
Yeah,
till she figured, and I did trust that you were going to figure it out, but until you figured it out, that I felt
that's true.
more of a weight. We had a new baby, and so it's like, how do I navigate that? Because there's
Hmm.
a lot of ways people react when their spouse is struggling with
Yeah.
that. I mean, some people get mad, some people get frustrated, some people think, well, if you're going to leave me, I'm going to leave you first. I mean, I've seen
They
people
give
do
up.
a lot of things, and so I
Yeah.
think that's really probably the only time in the marriage that I really felt the weight of it. Financially, sure, at times you feel that weight,
Yeah.
but that's kind of a normal part of life. I think, as we know, finance is the problem in every marriage at some time or other, almost all
Right.
marriages. And so you're going to go, that's kind of a normal thing you
Hmm.
work through. But I think carrying the weight of a marriage, and I think people I've worked with that feel like they're carrying it all the time.
I
And
bet you get that a lot.
and then when you
Yeah.
do, when a couple comes in for counseling, I can tell if one's carrying the weight of it because the
Mm.
other's not really engaging and they're not really doing the things we talk about in counseling. And so you have to come to that realization either you got to both be in. Now, you can carry the marriage for a while, like I did, but if you try to do it year after year after year, that gets old and resentments come and it's not what God intended,
You're right.
you know.
So, what do you advise those people that somebody's carrying the heavy load? How do you get them out of it?
Well, I think you learn to draw boundaries. Because I think it's easy to take advantage of someone like that. So
Hmm.
you learn to help them understand it's okay to draw boundaries with their spouse of what you
Hmm.
can and can't do or
Yeah.
will and won't do. And also to be real honest with your spouse. Hey, this isn't working for me. I want to stay married to you. I love you, but we need to do some things different than we're doing now. I can't continue to carry the weight of this marriage. You've got to meet me
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
halfway, you know,
At least
or more.
or
It's
more.
100%, 100%, not
There
50
you
50,
go.
right? How do you stay connected when life stages pull you in different directions? Parenting, career shift, aging parents, those kind of things. How do we stay connected as we go through those different
Well, I
stages of
mean, there's
life?
some things that happen that you have no control over. Like if you um, all of a sudden, God forbid, lose a child, or you lose a job, or something
Illness?
catastrophic like that.
Yeah.
You've got to. That's a whole different deal. But there are certain stages if you've got kids and that kind of thing and you are going to face aging parents and different problems. But I think you live for the day that you're in, knowing God's going to help you in the future. Whatever comes your way, whether it's an immediate catastrophe or whatever, that God's there and He's going to show you the way and just rely on that.
So if you plan for the future, you mean that doesn't work?
Well, no, I mean, you
No,
make
but
plans,
no, but
for
I mean, you can't do I can't do anything about tomorrow. And
exactly.
if I miss today, what have I missed?
That's right.
And
So
I think
people, if they worry about the future so much, you're not going to enjoy today.
No, I think the healthiest thing is like, okay, so we go from having kids or having not kids, first 5
That's
years of
right.
marriage,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden adjusting to having kids. And I think
Hmm.
we did a pretty good job there. It was different.
Yeah.
We had to figure things out. It was much easier with one than it was with two because
Right.
then it just
Yeah.
multiplies everything. And so I think as you go through each season, you just have to make sure that you make the adjustments in your marriage you need to stay connected and do
Right.
the things that keep your marriage healthy. Because I tell people all the time, you're modeling marriage for your kids, and if they
Oh,
don't see
yeah.
it
That's
from
so
you,
true.
they're gonna see it from
That's
somewhere else, and
right.
you want them to see it from some movie or TV show or something like that that gives a very
Well,
distorted view.
that is such a great thought. I mean, if all of us had realized what an impact our relationship had on our children, our family, because I do tutoring, and just to see the problems that are there because two people couldn't get along,
and what it does.
has a generational impact down the line.
Yeah.
Somebody somewhere has got to figure it out and come to
Well,
grips with it.
and I think it's just so easy. I think one of the things, I was talking to another counselor recently, we're just talking about how easy it seems for some people to give up
Yeah,
instead of persevering through that. And, we could have given up a lot of times.
a lot.
But I'm so glad we persevered through it, because you don't get to where we are or where we've been for quite a while without persevering through those things.
That's
Because
right.
God uses those to refine us and to grow us together.
Mhm.
And there's a
And grow us in Him.
and there's a celebration that comes from going through things like
Mhm.
that and
I
coming
agree.
out on the other side.
Yeah.
So I think those are really important. How do you prepare spiritually and emotionally for change as a couple? I think this is an important one, because I think, sure, you can just go along and act like God doesn't exist and you have a crisis and you run to God and He's going to be there. I get that.
Yeah.
But if you're praying every day and you're connecting spiritually every day and you're connecting emotionally every day, then if a crisis comes, you've got your foundation.
That's right.
It doesn't make it easy, but you know where your strength comes from.
That's right.
And
it doesn't make it easy, but it makes it easier.
yeah, exactly. As you go through it, because you've got that foundation, your relationship
right.
with God. And I think that's what we talk so much about, doing everything daily. And that's why, because if you do, it just builds something that is
Mhm.
invaluable, really.
Well, at our age, we've been through the death of grandparents, parents, loved ones, close friends, all that
Yeah.
stuff. And if we hadn't had our grounding in Christ, it would have been so much harder.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, I can't even imagine how some people do it.
No,
Really.
no, I agree. It was, we've talked about it before. Part of my dad's death was the first, well, my granddad first and then my dad. But those were hard, but I knew you take that, you like to step
Yeah.
back and look at the bigger picture. Okay, this is God's plan.
Mm-hmm.
I know they're in God's hands.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be there. I'm going to see him again. So you can go through that. If you don't have that hope, it would be really scary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How do you navigate miscommunication or conflict in a way that honors God and each other? Miscommunication or conflict.
So, in other words, when
If we don't do it right.
If we don't do it right, well, I know that I've learned that one of the things that's a conflict is when you're driving and I'm in the car.
No.
And so I've learned that it ain't worth it.
When did you learn that?
Well, I'm better.
I guess it was yesterday.
I'm a lot better.
Yeah, I guess you are. I see you over there gritting your teeth.
But I mean, that's part of it. I mean, is realizing, is it worth it?
Right.
Is this conflict really worth it?
It's
in the
choosing your
long
battles.
range plan?
Right.
Choosing your battles. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I think we do a pretty good job. I think we both can get angry. I think we're much better about recovering from that than we used to. We'd stay angry a lot longer.
Oh yeah, it was whoever could hold the grudge the longest wins.
Yeah, and that was great.
Sounds so stupid.
It never worked at all. Yeah, I think, and we do want to honor God, and so I think being conscious of. I think when I heard someone say for the first time that you are talking to someone that God created, that God gave you as a gift, and that God gave you to love and take care of, it's kind of like, okay, I probably should not get angry and yell and scream. I mean, it doesn't make sense, because what we've learned is that never solved anything for us. What solves it is sitting down and talking to each other about how we feel and what we think and listening to each other, right?
And I mean, we still break down. I'll scream or something at you. But it's just how quickly you can, get through that. And
we get over it quick.
Forgive me, I got angry,
Yeah, and I think we both, if we're, I think the thing we are working on now is kind of what you were saying, and me the same thing, to just not to choose my battles well, and to just appreciate each other, to look at that bigger picture,
Agree.
And to let things go. And if it's something important, not yell at you about it, but to say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this.
Yeah.
That would work. That works much better.
That would work.
Tools or practices that have transformed the way you communicate as a couple. I would say stop, look, listen. When we first discovered that, with actually before us in marriage, back when I started teaching prep for marriage, and that was back in '96 when I was teaching it 3 or 4 times a year. And we stop. The principle is you want to communicate. You stop everything you're doing.
Mhm.
You get it where you can look in each other's eyes, which is so important to me because I get distracted easy. And then you listen to every word they say in a way so that you can acknowledge that and let them know you
Yeah.
heard by a response that fits instead of you telling me something and me going, well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
No, that's not going to solve anything.
Right.
To really listen and try to understand each other. And I think what we found over the years, most of the time that prevents or solves a conflict.
Right.
Because if I really listen to you and you listen to me, we understand each other, that pretty much usually solves it because
Yeah.
we're not that far apart on
Yeah.
things.
True.
And so it's taking time to do that. And I think it's, we don't sit down now and say, hey, let's do stop, look, listen. It just becomes,
Natural.
it's a habit. It's just, that's the way we deal with things. We talk in the evenings, we look in each other's eyes, we sit together, we talk to each other.
Right.
Sometimes I know you might be sitting here and me here, and then I'll move over here because I can't see you. I can see your eyes better, like that. So I think the other thing is praying together. Prayer, I think that part of has transformed our communication. I think as
so
we have
too.
gotten more vulnerable, not that you have to get vulnerable in prayer, but we have. And I think when we have heard that with each other, we learn about each other, and God's used that to grow us closer together to Him.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's why we harp on all the time about pray together.
Mm-hmm.
Do 10 seconds, whatever it takes.
Whatever.
I noticed our pastor had I think it was a TikTok, and he had a T-shirt on that had his wife on it, but he was just saying, I'm going to teach you how to pray with your wife. And he said, you keep it short. And I won't remember all three. You keep it short. You keep it consistent. But if you miss one day, don't miss two. And I don't know what the third one was, but just that whole
It had to
deal.
be good.
It had to be good.
That's good so
I wish
far.
I had. Yeah. No, and I think that's.
Do you want a T-shirt with
now
my picture on it?
His third was, and maybe someday you'll get a T-shirt with your wife's picture on it. That's what his third one was. So it really is. It's keep it short, because I think sometimes with guys who get intimidated. I mean, I can't pray like so and so and so and so, but you can pray, and God wants to hear from you. And if it's 30
just talking
seconds,
to God. That's right.
It's just saying, God, help our marriage. Help me to love her better. Help her to love me better.
Right.
Just simple things. Help us to be better parents today.
Yeah.
Just start with that and watch God begin to show up. And then you'll see the difference it makes. And hopefully that encourages you to do more. All right. What are some ways you keep fun, laughter, and joy alive in your marriage?
Well, we have some friends that they play pranks on each other. Not mean pranks. These are all funny pranks. Like when one of them gets up to use the restroom in the evening, they might come back and their pillowcase is gone.
Yeah. Or one time.
Now that would make me mad, though.
I don't know how he did it, but remember he short-sheeted the bed. He had planned it, so I guess it was easier by the time you come back.
Yeah.
But they laugh at that. And I think
They
if your spouse doesn't like pranks, then don't do it.
Yeah.
But having fun with each other like that. So on the weekends especially, because we wake up together and we lay in bed talking. Usually Nancy gets on the weather and reads me what the weather's going to be. And then we have on the places we've been or like to go, like London and Sydney and all this kind of stuff, and go through and see what the weather's there. So she's using the voice of the time, like she used an English voice for London and the Australian voice for Australia.
You thought that was real funny.
I started dying laughing. It was. And then all of a sudden, but then you start laughing too.
Well, I was laughing because you were laughing.
Well, it was just and a couple of things, you made a dialect that had nothing to do with that country. It was like, where'd you get that at all?
I don't know.
But I think
just laughing,
being free with each other and laugh
and to laugh about.
Watch funny videos together.
Yeah, there you go.
And just laugh at things, or there's some funny people on Instagram and stuff like that, and just share those things.
Yeah.
When you find something like that, share them with each other.
It is.
That's good. We had a couple of questions come in from one of our marriage changers, actually. And if you don't know what marriage changer is, go on awesomemarriage.com and find out. So this couple said, They're always disappointed when we learn of couples who end up in divorce. The question is, in our culture that puts its emphasis on if it feels good, do it, and marriage
Mm.
vows are just a nice tradition, we know that marriage can occasionally make us all feel like we're swimming against the current. What are two or three things you feel are most important to you and Nancy in having such an
Mm.
awesome and lengthy marriage in spite of that outside influence?
Wow.
Well, I think you got to keep the world out because there are so many distractions out there
There
that lead
are.
you away from an awesome marriage, and the enemy can make them look really really enticing until you do it, and then he tells you how stupid you are. I mean, it's just a losing proposition. So I think
Mm.
for us it was keeping those distractions out. I think if we were saying earlier in marriage, if we were around a couple maybe and they weren't taking their marriage where we thought we wanted ours to go, we would bail.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
that just wasn't something good. I think,
You've got to nurture and grow your own marriage despite what's going on around you. And it really does help if you have strong Christian couples to do life with.
absolutely.
Life groups, anything, but get together with some people that are,
And we were blessed. God, I think
yeah,
when Grant was 5 and started playing baseball, there was a group of parents there,
that's
and we
right.
were all like-minded. And we spent a lot of time together at the
And we
ballpark
were
and
all
eating dinner after
Christians,
game.
yes.
And so I think having that support and knowing that,
Yes.
you know, and I think the longer I've been in ministry, to know that if I stepped out of my marriage, if I did something that was immoral, how would it affect you? How would it affect my kids, my grandkids,
Right.
the people that follow us? But no, it's not worth it.
No,
Now,
no, no.
and the other thing is, I think you always have to realize you're vulnerable. And anytime you think you're not vulnerable, I think you're setting yourself up. We're
That's
all
good advice.
we're all vulnerable,
Yeah.
and we have to keep on our guard with
Yeah.
prayer and the decisions we make.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that you said earlier about the covenant and how we began to take that seriously, that we
Yeah.
weren't going to
That's right.
do that. And so when you honor that covenant, you're stuck.
Yeah,
You're
are.
married. And so you either end up killing each other in marriage or you make it work.
Make it work.
And we,
Choose
thank
the
goodness,
latter.
with God's help, we
That's
made it
right.
worse.
That's right.
Made it work. Not worse. Made it work. Made it work. Okay.
Oh boy.
Last question. Most of the time we have disagreements. We'll discuss this as a couple and we come to a compromise solution. Occasionally, a disagreement will escalate, which leaves each of us feeling frustrated. What are some things we can do to diffuse the situation before it gets unpleasant?
Wow. Well,
You looking at me? I think you can
I
stop,
think
look,
one
listen,
thing
Morris.
is you've got to realize where you're headed.
Oh, I
you
think
know,
that's good. I think
And
you got
just say, hey, is this, like we've talked about, is this worth it?
yeah, and I think
Do I really want to get my stomach in a knot?
Right.
I mean,
and your tone of voice, how you present
I
yourself,
don't want to hurt you that bad.
stop and pray. I had a couple, and I've suggested a lot of couples. I only had one couple over years to do it. So when you get in the heat of that, stop and pray. And they're telling about it the first time was great. I think she was ready to pummel him, and he goes, "Let's pray," and she goes, growled at him, but they did, and it made a difference.
Yeah, that's great.
And I know that's not the easiest thing to do when you're
Well,
upset at
talk
each other.
about something that'll work for you. I mean, just
Yeah.
stop it.
Yeah, and I think if you're in that pattern, where's the trigger?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? What keeps us from, if we usually come to a solution, what are the situations when we don't? Is
Yeah.
it when we're tired? Is it when whatever? Figure it out and then
Yeah.
say, okay, let's get a signal, which I think is really good. Whether it's raise your hand or whatever. And the deal
But
is,
don't hit anybody.
no, and if you're, no, what I'm saying is,
Oh.
if, no, Ah, no, what I'm saying is, if a signal that if either one of you gives that signal, it means it's a timeout.
There you go.
It's a timeout.
There
We
you
go our
go.
separate ways, and you honor that with each other. Then
Right.
you can go and pray, think through, come back, and talk about it in a better way. But it's just stopping it, and the quicker the better, because
Oh yeah.
I think the farther you let it go, the harder it is to stop.
Mhm.
And so we got to catch it back here.
Yep.
The last question they had for us was, what are you enjoying most about your marriage today? Now,
Time. So much more time together.
yeah,
Even though we both still work, we're not as involved in so many other activities.
we're not on boards, we're not on
Right,
committees
right.
like we were for
And
so long.
I think that's really it.
I
And just enjoying the wisdom we've come to know, and enjoying our time that we built so strong through the years. It's, taken a lot of hard work, kind of sitting back and enjoying it.
It's kind of like reaping the fruit of a lot of
There
work.
you
And we
go.
reaped it all along.
Yeah, but I
But
mean,
now
this
you're in
is
a
really
point where it
special.
really, it is
Yeah.
special. I think every part of our relationship
Yep.
is special.
Yep.
That's
Okay.
good.
That's good.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us. Awesome Marriage Podcast. We got some other great podcasts this month for you guys. So check the social media to see what those are. And then I'll be back again with you in August. Wow. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.